Well, you and I both know that life doesn't always go the way we plan. Rarely does it go the way we plan. It doesn't typically even go the way we hope it's going to go. And maybe you look at your life and you go, this wasn't even the life that you expected to live. Or you say, you know what, everything going on around me, it's just not what I expected, what I planned. God's not even what I expected or what I planned in my life and what's going on around me in my life. And whenever we find ourselves in that situation where we're just surprised by, disappointed by, not expecting what's happening in our lives, there's a series of words that we tend to use to describe our feelings in that moment. And so maybe you've used some of these. Maybe you said, you know what, I just feel very disillusioned about life, not the way I thought it was going to be. Or perhaps you'd use the word devastated. Your life has just been devastating to you, or you might say you just feel let down, like it just wasn't what you hoped for, expected. Or maybe you'd say you just feel like you're driven to the brink of just utter frustration. You just say, I am so frustrated with the way life is going. A snapshot of what was going on with Esther's life, death in her life. She lost both her mom and her dad at a young age. Beauty, the Bible describes her as being beautiful of form and face. And disregard because what's interesting about Mordecai and Esther is they shouldn't have even been living in Susa at this time. They had been instructed to go back to Jerusalem with all of the other Jewish people, and so they weren't even supposed to be there. They just kind of disregard what God had asked them to do, so they find themselves in this situation because they've disregarded God in this moment. There were all kinds of hormones going on in this setting. Beyond hormones, there was sex, and beyond sex, there was more sex and violations. Violations towards the women that were involved in this whole process. Violations against what God actually says is appropriate. See, Esther should not have been having sexual relations with somebody outside of marriage, and she shouldn't have even been married to somebody that wasn't also following and loving God as well. And so violating all kinds of things in that situation, and then more and more partying going on. And you kind of look at this, there's secrets happening. There's just all kinds of things going on in this setting that you just go, oh man, what a mess. What a mess that Esther and Xerxes find themselves in. So you look at Mordecai, what's going on around him. Let me just kind of give you a snapshot of that as well. There's anger going on because there are men angry enough at the king that they want to kill him. There's deceit in that they're just going to say, let's plot, let's assassinate him when he's not aware. There's murder involved. There is impalement. Let's put both of these guys on a stick and we will just impale them and kill them that way. And then there's salvation because the king is saved because of Mordecai. And Esther talking about that, and you look at this whole thing and you go, oh my goodness. As you look at all of this, how does it compare to your life? Are any of these elements involved in your life? And as you look at this and as you think about your life, is there any way that God could be involved in your life? Is there any way that God could possibly be present in the things that are going on in your life as well? And it may seem to you that there's no way that God could work in this environment. And it may seem to you that there's no way that God could actually work in your life, in your environment as well. And yet to describe kind of what goes on with God and to describe the fact that God could be involved in this circumstance with these situations going on around him, there's a concept that's called the providence of God. The providence of God just says, yeah, God is active, involved in those kind of settings. The providence of God, if I give you a definition, is simply this. It's God setting things up so that what he wants to accomplish will actually be accomplished. It's God using all of those different things that were on the board and saying, you know what, I can work with this and I can make the things happen that I want to make happen. You and I, we kind of tend to look at the individual things in our lives. We look at the fact that we're not here anymore, we're sliding, we're falling, and everything seems to be falling apart. Everything seems to be chaos. The providence of God says in the midst of that chaos, the providence of God says in the midst of us sliding, God can take all of those events and all of those circumstances and he can work them together and he can do something beautiful with that. And so what's interesting is from God's point of view, as he looks at our lives, he sees the whole thing. When we look at it, we see each individual event. We see each event that's causing us to slide, that's causing us pain. And as we look at those events, we think there's no hope. We think there's no way God could be present. But from God's perspective, he sees the whole thing. And your life to you seems like this just series of just kind of random events where it's just luck or chance or random events happening in your life. And God says, no, it's not random events. It's not chance. He says there's no place for chance. There's no place for luck in your life. There's no place for random events in your life. God says, yeah, I'm in the middle of it, and I'm working to do what I want to do in my life. And here's the thing that's challenging about the providence of God. God typically doesn't tell us the whole plan. He doesn't show us how we're going to go and hit bottom and we're going to work our way back up and he's going to do something more beautiful. He says he's going to do that, but he doesn't show us the plan. And I don't know if you're like me, but I love to know the plan. I was like, that's fine, that's great, we're going to get there. So now tell me the steps. What's going to happen, God? How are we going to get there each step of the way? And God doesn't do that. He just says, there's going to be a point where I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to mix it together. I'm going to do something amazing beyond what you could possibly ever think or imagine of your life. But he doesn't give us the whole plan. He doesn't give us a full view of the map to say, here's what's going to happen next. And instead he says, one step at a time. And God's actually in control. His method of being in control often involves twists, turns, meanderings, and that causes us concerns. Because we feel like we're sliding, we feel like we're in trouble, and you may not see it now because you find yourself in the space between and you find yourself in a place where you say, God's not working, I don't know what he's doing in my life, and so you're frustrated, but God says, no, wait a minute. If you will follow me, I will do something in your life. I'm about to mix things together to do something amazing in your life. But the problem for all of us is we don't like the providence of God. The problem is we like autonomy. The problem is we want to be in control. And beyond that, not only do we want to be in control, but as we find ourselves sliding down, headed towards rock bottom, we want to be in control. We want to control things ourselves. We begin to think we could control better than God control things. And so we find ourselves saying, you know what? I can control this better than God. God, you're messing up. I can do better than you. But the truth actually is, we can't. I like what Lisa Turkhurst, an author, says this about us wanting control. She says, we don't want to just read the end of our story and feel good about it. We don't want to just read what's going to happen here. Instead, she says, we want to take the pen and write it ourselves. We feel very certain about how things should turn out. She says, we think we know how we want it to end. And so when things start sliding, we want to take the pen from God and say, oh, wait a minute, God, I think I do it better writing this than you. And so let me just write out how I think things ought to finish up. So I like what Lisa Turkhurst, again, says in this moment. She says, here are things that we don't have to do. She said, you don't have to know the plan in order to trust the fact that there is a plan. You don't have to know exactly where God's going to take you in order to trust the fact that he's got a plan. She also says you don't have to feel good to trust that there's good coming. You don't have to be in a position, you might feel as bad as you can possibly feel down at the bottom. You don't have to feel good and then realize, oh, good is coming. You could feel terrible. Doesn't mean good still isn't coming. Beyond that, you don't have to see evidence that changes are coming. That it's not always going to be this bad. You don't have to even see any evidence. You might not see any sense, no clues that anything is about to change or turn. Doesn't matter. Providence of God is working. He's working to do his plan. But what we do in those moments as we seek to follow Jesus is, first of all, she says, just close your eyes. And just begin to turn your thoughts on Jesus. Begin to think about Jesus, but even go beyond that. Fix your thoughts on Jesus. Think nothing more than just Jesus. What we tend to do at the bottom, what we tend to do as we're sliding, is we focus on all the events that are happening in our lives, and we get so discouraged and so depressed. We find ourselves at rock bottom. We think we'll never turn around. And the advice is stop looking at the events, stop looking at the circumstances of our lives, begin to focus on Jesus, fix our thoughts on Jesus. And then I like what Lisa says. She makes one more recommendation. Just say his name over and over and over again. If you're having a hard time at the bottom, as you find yourself sliding and you're discouraged, focus on Jesus. Just say his name again and again, just Jesus. Jesus, I'm choosing to follow you. I'm choosing to trust you in this moment.